Hey, hey, hey. Welcome back to another episode of Friendly Advice. We have a guest. This is my man. This is Ronald, my husband. Say hello.
Hello, how we doing, party people? I'm doing good. Awesome.
You just only ask open-ended questions.
Okay, gotcha. Sorry, new here.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I have gotten this question a couple of times from actual lifelong friends and just random strangers on the internet. How I continue to convince Ron to just lean into me running a business. This is like business idea number 1000, but actual action business like number 3. Because then there was the app first. Yeah. There was the app first. I was a virtual assistant and became an agency owner. And now I'm coaching people one-on-one. And somehow this man keeps saying, okay. So we'll talk about what that looks like, how I quote unquote convince him. And honestly, we'll talk about why that's a like terrible thought process to say like you need to convince your spouse to do anything. But yeah, it's mostly going to be about Ron talking today, and I will like chat a little less. You look a little surprised.
Yeah, I'm ready. I got plenty to say.
Okay, I'm going to look over here at some questions just to stay on track. But first, just tell us about our relationship. I'd love to hear it from your point of view. Like,
oh, wait. Wow. You wait till we get on the camera.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I mean, the thing often we get questions around this as well is, how our marriage works. People always want to know the secrets. So what do we do? How do we work things out? How do we deal with conflict? How do we, get anything accomplished overall? Working together as a team is very important. But I think starting with God, again, we have strong faith beliefs and we put God first. But the other thing is, again, with our relationship, we were friends first. I think in a lot of different areas, a lot of people try to jump straight to the romance and that part first. And sometimes you can skip a few things along the way when you try to go that route. So for us, it's really always giving us that foundation. And in that, I just kind of have the 3 C's of what I usually do. I think there is communication. So we have to have open lines to be able to communicate, express our ideas, express where we might have some places that hurt, some places that feel good. We need to be able to express those things. And then there needs to be compromise. Sometimes you won't always get what you want. Sometimes it might not be everything that the other person wants. So there needs to be some centered ground where you all can meet and be amicable and have an agreement. And then third is consistency. In those areas, there may be some changes that come along the way, but there will need to be constant and consistent communication. There will probably need to be consistent compromise in those areas. So just making sure you kind of keep those ideas on the foundation, and having that kind of relationship with your friend will make all the difference.
Yay. And honestly, this is not my first time hearing about the 3 C's. And he also uses it at work. And I'm always like, my man. Anyway. So my first question for you is, what was your initial reaction the first time I told you I wanted to start a business?
So starting a business, one thought, I have this lifelong dream of being a stay-at-home dad. So for me, I was like, oh, great. She's going to just go ahead and make me a trophy husband. So this is it. This is our ticket. So for that was, a place that was still scary because, again, I came from a house where it was like traditionally, go to school, get an education, get a good stable job, and work till you're 60. So finding out, as things kind of evolved in the world and in life, your values change, and where your perspective kind of lands also grows as well. So for me, it gave me an opportunity to say, all right, hey, here's a chance where you get to kind of step out of the box a little bit. And for me, I'm always kind of very risk averse. I'm not trying to do much that's going to be too dangerous or too risky. So I will stay right here in the box. But this was an opportunity to do that, and it grew me. So from that standpoint, it was a new venture. So I think in a lot of ways, I usually stay in a place where I'm not very adventurous. But yeah, this was a chance for a new adventure for me.
So just to set expectations about like what you will learn from Ron. No, Ron will not always be on podcast episodes. He actually does not enjoy being in front of the camera with me. So this is actually a treat. He may never return. He might return. Fingers crossed.
Don't I look so natural, right?
So a lot of the questions I tend to get will answer some of the common concerns around like your spouse being on board with your business ideas. And then one of the other like really big questions I get is about how your spouse felt like when you started investing in your business. So I am no stranger to making large dollar number investments in business coaches, courses, technology, etc. Some of it unnecessary, and I should have listened, but others very, very much needed. So we'll address like his thoughts and feelings around it, how it also probably helped him because Ron has started doing his own little business ventures on the side. Because you know what? I inspire this man. I am his muse. I am his night and day. No, that's the Lord. But anywho, the first question I have is my very first business coach cost $4,000. Do you remember that?
Yes.
What was your initial feeling when I came to you and said, I want to hire the stranger from the internet and she's going to help me make a business?
I said, you're getting scammed. Internal process. So again, I don't always say the first thing that comes to mind. I want to kind of make sure it sounds right because I can be kind of blunt with some answers. So first it was like, that's too much for a coach. In a lot of different ways, I always see an approach of if you work at anything, you gotta do enough discovery, and you gather enough information. You don't really need a coach. There's enough information out there that you can get for free, and you have enough skill and talent that you should be able to apply and grow this on your own. So my thought process was, it's probably a little scammy. It's probably unnecessary because my overall appeal with coaches has always been, it just kind of feels like they aren't really telling me what to do. They're just kind of coaching and saying, the power's been within you the whole time. You always had the power to do this within. So it just kind of felt like motivational speakery. So for me, it was just like, not much of an investment, at least from my seat where I saw it.
I mean, I feel that there are some very much like cheerleader-esque coaches who are just kind of like, you got this, you're just smart. But what happened when I tripled my investment back within 2 months? Like, how did you feel like as the new money was coming in?
So before we got to that point, I'm always, again, to just kind of give more background on me. I'm a petty person, and I will usually sign up and say, all right, let's go ahead and do whatever you want to do, and we'll see what happens or what the result of it is.
You are.
So from there, I'm like, hey, I'll save my piece. This is what I think, and then we'll see what happens at the end of the road. So I do that because it usually hedges my bets, because I usually kind of think the universe or God will set me up to be wrong in most scenarios. So I'll go ahead and put that out there and kind of be like, well, hey, if I'm wrong, then we'll end up with some more money. And that's when the money started rolling in. So when it turned out to be profitable, I was glad. I was, one, trying to make sure that it was a place that would be stable and steady, because that was also my other fear around, jumping out and being into a entrepreneurial space. But that was my thought process of it. It was, hey, that's a lot of money to invest. But once you actually start seeing the results of it in a positive manner, I jumped on board, of course, hopped on the bandwagon.
Do you actually know what I used to do?
What?
Like when I was running my agency, can you describe it to people, like what I was as a CEO?
Yeah, for sure. She ran a business.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
What kind of business?
A professional virtual business.
The funny thing about the business I chose, Ron taught me how to edit podcasts. So before I started a business, I started my podcast, and I was just in a closet in an attic and recording using equipment he already owned. So that's why he was very hesitant on me hiring somebody to teach me something, because pretty much all the things I did so far, either he or I figured it out. Like, I learned how to manage our money and started sharing it with the world. He already knew how to do like sound and mixing and mastering because he worked at his father's church. So he was the sound guy at church. So he understood what we could do to make a podcast. We learned a couple things here and there. But yeah, so that's why he is just kind of like, you can do this on your own.
Yeah, little YouTube university,
And and I'm not a patient human. So like after 2 YouTube videos and I'm still not understanding, I'm like, I just need someone to tell me directly what to do. I want to go the path of least resistance real fast. So yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Speaking of money and managing a business in your family structure, how much concern was about more so like our family and our finances versus just like letting me go do the thing I felt passionate about?
So that's definitely top of the list, because, in priorities, those things are, stereotypically kind of looked at or kind of fall onto the male counterpart in marriages or relationships. So where we were trying to head as far as financial freedom and growth as far as our family, I just kind of feel like whatever happens, whether it's her doing it via business, whether it's us doing it via a 9-to-5 job, it's still ultimately going to come down to, hey, you were supposed to be, the one making the calls or the shots as the head of the household. So that was a major factor in it to say, one, let me take a step back and kind of get out of the societal norm or the stereotypes that we've been taught, because it can be damaging, if you try to go down that path and just only be the protector and provider and all those things. You can be that, but also do it in different ways and different manners. Because again, you could be somebody that's setting up to be able to support and say, all right, hey, this is how we provide it. If I didn't give that space for her to open that business, then we would have been still running into these same dead end jobs that maybe didn't give them that freedom or didn't give us that freedom to do what we've done so far. And then also it also helps change your mindset, because now you see things in a different way. So for so long, I still had this mindset of just trying to climb the corporate ladder and do things just the regular way we've been taught. But seeing the back end of kind of running a business, and seeing how that is vastly different than actually just working at a business or a company, definitely helped my mindset and how I approach things in both music and my 9-to-5, in relationships. So it definitely helps on that front.
Nice. Okay. So let's talk about the importance of like already understanding how to communicate about money before even thinking about starting a business. Because honestly, let's be serious. Your spouse is only hung up about you starting a business and leaving your job because you need it in your budget.
Yeah.
And a lot of women I know don't own any part of their finances or their budgeting. And I know some who are the only one in charge, but I don't think there should be one person in charge of your finances at your house. So talk to them about why like our already solid communication skills with money helped when it comes to me putting in a 2 weeks notice now for the second time.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think what you said there is already important, to not have one person kind of carrying that burden on their own, because that's stressful. We've tried it both sides. It was, again, we was like, hey, you take the money, and then it's like, well, hey, this isn't working. You take the money back. So I think, again, the whole reason of you coming together in a marriage or another is to be a partner, again, to do life together, as they say. So I think that's a portion of life that's important, because, we need to be able to, purchase things, shelter, food, water, all those great things, necessities that I think with putting that stress on one person can start to become unbearable. Take it to scripture, they always talk about being equally yoked, or, kind of being in the same struggle together is how I rephrase it. Having those places or moments to say, hey man, I know this stuff is hard, but you can look over there to your right or to your left and look at your partner and say, I know, but we're in this together. Here's how we can figure it out. So having that helps your powers combine, because you both have areas where you might have some blind spots and you might have some strengths. And usually, you can want to make sure that those are usually not in the same area, but even if they are, if we have the same blind spots, I'm easily able to identify hers. If it's like, hey, well, I can see your blind spot right here, and it can be the same blind spot and I can not see it in myself. But that conversation and that communication piece will help open that up to say, well, hey, you also have a problem with spending too much on these things. So we have these conversations where we can both call each other out and say, all right, let's put it on the table and figure out how we can work at it together.
And it's loving call outs. Even though young Fran was very offended at all call outs, still sometimes she does spring up. And I still am like, why would you say this to me? But either way, remembering that your partner always comes from a place of love and not hurt is like really important when it comes to these kind of conversations too. I'm not a therapist. I can't tell you too much more about that other than like it should be the foundation. If it is not right now, find you a therapist real fast.
I will say and add there, sometimes in that communication line, it is still very important because what you say might be true, might be correct, but it's not always about what you say. It can be how and when you say it. So finding delivery and timing is very important.
Dang, you come with all the quotables. All right. Now we're going to talk about bringing my partner along on the journey. So as I mentioned before, Ron taught me how to edit podcasts. So he did understand in general what I was doing in my business. He didn't understand the back end of how I was managing, how I was finding people, and why it was taking so many people to do the job until I hired him for a second. Ron was never paid. Our household was. But there was a time when I first switched over to doing podcast management, and it was just me and Nika editing. And this was before I hired Nika's husband. I was just like crying at night. I would be up at like 3 a.m. because at that point I had like 15 podcasts to edit, and I had one bitch of a client. Sorry for my language. You don't look super surprised because you remember her, but I would be trying to make her podcast perfect, but I have these other 12 to edit as well. And I'm up at 3 a.m. and Ron is just like, do you need help? He stepped in and he would edit. How did you feel like when you were on like Team Fran?
For me, again, I think my demeanor and overall values in life are weird, really weird. So in the sense of, I don't really want to be like, okay, hey, I came in and saved the day. Like I'm not that,
but you did.
that person. Right. But I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to say it and have it be broadcast in there. I don't want to be important. I just want to be impactful. I want to help. And then you don't ever have to know it was me that helped. That's just the approach I take. So what I said earlier, it was just coming from a place of support. I see that there's a need there. How can I help? And again, if it's a space where I have some knowledge or expertise in it, of course, happy to do so, because not only that, it might be a little narcissistic. It helped me learn a little bit because I'm like, okay, how can I fit this, whatever the client is looking for, and meet this need from this, highly demanding customer. That'll help me. That way I can say, okay, well, hey, I've being able to edit a podcast that calls for XYZ, but even at a higher level. So it helps me in a sense to say, all right, hey, now I've grown in that space and I can speak to that a little bit better. But again, I'm not to just, I just wanted to make sure the business kept going and rolled as it needed to, and, take any relief or any stress I can away from my wife. So just trying to be helpful.
And he called his cousin, who's a producer, so we could all just tell that lady she was being crazy. And then I fired her. But anywho, so tell me about the moment you became like a true believer in the Pod Factory. And Ron used to even he still does, tell people like, hey, if you want to start a podcast, my wife has a whole company that edits podcasts. And now I can hear him sometimes being like, oh yeah, like if you're thinking you want to run a business, go talk to my wife. And I'm like, what? Why are you always telling random people about me? Sometimes I get people from Ron and I'm like, I'm not the right person, but I'll send you in the right direction. But what made you become this disciple of Fran's work?
When you become a husband, you already automatically become a billboard for whatever they're doing. So that was one layer to it. But again, I think it was helpful for you to see that you could help transform lives and change people's ideas that were just these intangible things that were floating around in their heads, because it also probably gave you a nostalgic level of saying, hey, this is something that I was just in. I was in a place where this was all an idea before the Pie Factory got started. And now I'm here. It's a real thing. It's functioning and it's working. It's living. So for me, I think, I'm not sure exactly when it happened or the pinpoint of it, but it was mutually beneficial. I mean, come on now. If I could get more people to the Pod Factory, closer to trophy dad status, I'm trying to get trophy husband,
That's true. That is true. We've both been fighting for stay at home life, not with the kids, just a stay at home. I'm just here cleaning up, being helpful around the house. So maybe one day we can both stay at home together. All right. The last thing we're going to talk about is the risk and reward of business. So, as someone who has closed a business twice, because I started one to like make apps for people to teach them how to budget, close that one relatively fast. And then I closed the Pod Factory after I had postpartum depression. How did you feel each time I made the decision to close it? And like, how do you feel overall now that I'm back about the risk of maybe closing a business again?
Honestly, it's risks scare me. Now, as we were talking before,
Yeah.
I'm very risk averse. I'm not trying to do anything that's not sure. I'm not that kid that was jumping off of the cars moving and stuff like that. I was a very, calm kid. So for me, I'm not willing to jump out there in a lot of scenarios. So with these kind of back and forth places, it's still scary. I will say that there is a place or moments where that come up where fear tries to come in and creep in. But again, that's an important portion of this is staying spiritually grounded, knowing that, you're not given the spirit of fear and, just recognizing where your power and help comes from in that space. So aside from that, again, making sure that those feelings are still communicated out in the open with your partner. So that way you can help and kind of step in where you can, as well as vice versa. They can support you and say, hey, I know you're feeling scared right now in this place. Is there an opportunity for me to, do some other type of work that would help with this? Or is there another way that we can work together on the budget to cut something that would help? And what ways would help relieve the fear and that's going on in your mind? And those are the kind of conversations we will have, or she'll have with me to help when I'm curled up in the fetal position, out of fear for it. So, but yeah, usually in those places, it's still another layer that I'll come out where I'll have those crazy fear moments, but then there'll also be those opposite ends of the spectrum where I'll be like, oh man, I can't wait until, we get to that next level and see where this is going, because there's also an option for great reward on the other side of that. I know there's risk, and that's usually the portion people focus on is the negative sometimes, but there's also a positive to that as well. So kind of looking at the possibilities and the opportunities there, and living in the hope and kind of having faith in that potential for it. So
Yeah, that's a good call. Like, we are very Christian, but the good kind. I'm just kidding. We're Christians, but we're both very left-leaning Christians. But in the morning, something that's been really helpful when I started to feel down about work again, and I started to think about wanting to start a business again, Ron actually took it upon himself to start praying together in the mornings. Because if you're married, you know this, like there's a moment in your marriage where you're just kind of like, yeah, I'll pray for you, like separately. I will go into my closet and pray for you, or I'll pray for you throughout the day. But he actually like stepped over the little hurdle of like praying separately and praying together. And it's been really helpful. It helped me feel the strength to tell him like, I can't do this. Like, I don't think I'm built for 9 to 5 life at this point or at this moment.
me neither.
And I also knew that I wanted to see my kids more, and I think he noticed it. He noticed I wanted to like be able to like just hang out with them at 2 p.m. for no reason. That's not most people's dreams or desires, but it was mine, and it still is. Like, to see them a lot is very important to me. So thank you for taking on all my crazy risks, but it did come with a lot of slashing of friends spending, so that was fun to go through. All right, so let's wrap it up with any advice you have for a spouse out there that is like struggling or teetering on the edge with their spouse like deciding they want to run a business.
So if you're in the seat that I am, and you're similar to me in the sense or situation, I would say go in and try to gather as much information and logic as far as what they're trying to do. See if you can put yourself in their shoes and gather perspective. Because usually I think from my seat, I would just say, hey, this doesn't make sense. And because I didn't know anything about the virtual agency or being a VA, virtual assistant, or being an OBM or running a business at all.
You know all these acronyms?
Yeah, I know these things. So I know stuff. But yeah, gathering information will help educate yourself. That way you can have a bit more information and you can have a true perspective of where they're going, what the market actually looks like for it. And, you can try to drive and help with those decisions as well. And even then, you might even become a part of their team and help in some supporting manner where you're doing a small portion of it to whatever your skill set may be. So with that, also keep an open mind because, like I said, things change, markets change, people change. So that's another probably an honorable mention C that we can add in there earlier on. We mentioned the 3 C's. We can probably add change in there as a 4th because that is also consistent. Things are liable to move and shift in directions. So to be able to pivot and be agile in those areas, it'll help you to be able to move whenever that move or that shift comes upon you.
Yes. And then just on the other side, the flip side, if you're the person who is starting your business, you need to be honest with your partner about like what you're feeling and what you want to do. Don't give them vagueness. Like whatever that vagueness is you're giving on Instagram, no, that's not for your husband. That's not for your partner. You need to give them details. You need to say like, hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing. It is in this industry. Here's a detailed link of like what's going on. Like, so for me, it was like sending him my coach's website, showing him some of the things I was thinking about doing for other people as a virtual assistant, and then telling him like how I would spend my time during the day being a VA and working my 9 to 5 at that time. And then also making sure I still had time for him. So present your idea to your partner. And honestly, sometimes presenting it to your partner will help you see the flaws in what your plan might be. You might switch it up because you might be like, well, you know what? That doesn't even make sense. I can't make it make sense to you. So let me go back to the drawing board. And that's also how I got like out of the app stuff because I couldn't help him understand it. And it was like, if I can't make you understand it, I can't make anyone understand it. Let's rethink Fran and business models, right? So be very honest and be like, give as much information as you can ahead of time to make sure they don't have to do a lot of the heavy lifting of learning. Ron was going to do his own research anyway. Him and YouTube are like in a partnership at this point. Like I come in my house and he has on some kind of YouTube video at all times learning something different. So he was going to do that, but I had to do my part first to tell him what it was, where I was going, and what it was going to take from our family for me to make this happen. All right. So anything else you want to share?
Only other thing I will say, ask questions, Yeah. I think the other portion of it that I didn't mention earlier was in that support space when you're, having a person that's building a business, ask questions, especially in the sense of where do you want me to support you? How do you want me to support you? What does that look like? Because that was a space that I struggle with not trying to come in and take over and be the next CEO with you or try to take over her business. But trying to make sure that she knows that this is something that she built, that she's doing on her own. But she's not alone in it, So I wanted to make sure that she's confident and she's knowing that she's being able to go in these rooms and make these bold decisions. And it's all her. It's not anybody else. It's not me that's pushing her because I showed her how to edit podcasts. It's her own doing. But again, I'm still here to support you in any way.
That is very true. Ron will learn new things for me when I like sit up and cry about stuff. I cried about a website and Ron was like, all right, let's look at YouTube and see how we can fix this before you spend the rest of your little dollars on hiring someone else. Yeah. But yes. All right. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. Y'all know I respond. DM me on Instagram. If you PM me on Facebook, I might see it, but most likely respond to me via email or on Instagram and let me know what you think. Also, if you're thinking about starting a business and you're just kind of like, I need help starting a virtual assistant agency, hit me up. I'm happy to coach you one-on-one and we can talk through like things I do to help Ron understand what I was doing as a virtual assistant and how I run my business and bringing my partner along, not in a way that's overwhelming where they feel like they're the COO of your business, but more so in a way where they feel like they know how to cheer you on. They know how to help you. They understand busy seasons. They understand like how much work and impact is going on. Like he understood that we were paying somebody's car note through the pot factory. He understood that we were keeping food on the table for a couple of people by me having contractors on my team and the importance of that. But he didn't have to look at every single time I was paying my team because I was taking care of that as the CEO, right? So we can talk through that as well in one-on-one coaching. But that's it for today. I'm so excited y'all keep listening. It's so weird that y'all really just returned. But anyway, see you next time. Bye.